Africans of goodwill have never doubted the value of Pan-Africanism. But Pan-Africanism has had no shortage of enemies from day number one. In the early days of its founding in the United States of America and in the Caribbean, when the target was decolonization and freedom from slavery, there was no shortage of individuals, some fifth columnists who were recruited by the enemies of Africa. And tales are told of how individuals such as Sylvester Williams were fought. Tales are told of how individuals such as W.B. Du Bois were fought. Tales are told how individuals later in the 60s were fought. And indeed, it is important to note that even in the context of the American Civil Rights Movement, the assassination of individuals such as Martin Luther King Jr. or Malcolm X must be seen as a struggle and a fight against Pan-Africanism. In the continent of Africa, when the struggle for decolonization started in earnest, when African leaders and African freedom fighters were fighting for African unity, the struggle to eliminate those who had died in the wool Pan-Africanists was happening in earnest. Indeed, when Africans were heading to Addis Ababa in 1963, the erstwhile colonizers had already divided Africa into the Casablanca group and into the Monrovia group. And the whole idea was to torpedo whatever it is that was going to unite the continent of Africa. And every effort was made to undermine Africans. And the effort was seen in the struggle for independence, during the struggle for independence, whether that struggle was taking place in Kenya or in Ghana or in Tanzania or in apartheid South Africa or the racist Namibia or the racist Rhodesia, now Zimbabwe, or in West Africa, in Nigeria or in Ghana or in Senegal or in the Sahel. The struggle was one. Always make sure that the Africans are not given the opportunity to unite. And indeed, no sooner had African countries started regaining their independence than the erstwhile colonizers started baring their teeth and showing their fangs and using their claws, so that in the Democratic Republic of Congo, a Pan-Africanist such as Patrice Emery Lumumba, within only 9 months of becoming the Prime Minister of Congo, he had been assassinated. Sylvanus Olympio of Togo was removed from power in 1963, and after that they started mounting coups d'etats. It is during those coups d'etats that the eminent Pan-Africanist Osagyefo Kwame Nkrumah was removed from power in 1966. A year later, Nnamdi Azikiwe of Nigeria was also eliminated. Modibo Keita was eliminated. Ahmed Ben Bella in Algeria had been eliminated. And there was every effort to undermine the leaders who survived the mutinies and the coups d'etats, such as Julius Kambarage Nyerere. So the Africa and Pan-Africanism has always had enemies. And the whole idea is that a united Africa is bad for the colonizers. The former colonizers were so very clever by one half, when upon departing from their erstwhile colonies, they created institutions which were designed to sustain colonization. Some may not agree with me, but when the British departed and they created what they call the Commonwealth of Nations, that is a neo-colonial institution whose great agenda is to ensure that her colonies remain under her control. When the Portuguese left their colonies in Angola or in Mozambique or in Cabo Verde or in Sao Tome or in Guinea-Bissau and create an organization for former Portuguese-speaking nation, they simply want to control, so that everything that is happening in Maputo or in Angola or happening in Bissau or happening in Praia is controlled from Lisbon. When the French were leaving during the infamous vote that was introduced by Charles de Gaulle, When individuals such as Ahmed Sékou Touré of Guinea voted no, and Algeria voted no with Ahmed Ben Bella in the forefront, what they did was to ensure that they remained under the destructive force of France, and those who accepted remained under the fold of the so-called Francophone, using French and using their currency. In other words, the enemies of Pan-Africanism, they come under different guises. And it is Kwame Nkrumah who got it right. He said, a tiger will never change its spots. It doesn't change its DNA. The colonial project doesn't die. It is replaced by the neo-colonial project. And those who held you under the chains of political domination are going to hold you under the chains of economic domination. And that is what is happening in Africa today. That is why the spirit of Pan-Africanism is fought on a daily basis. And that is why even when African institutions are created, they are undermined. You know, not so long ago I asked myself, does Europe love us so much that they meet us in Lomé, Togo, and have the Lomé Convention to develop our economy? Does Europe love us so much that they create the Cotonou Convention? Does Europe love us so much that they allow us to do certain things but only for their benefit? The answer is they do not. We as the continent of Africa must always remember that the agenda is to give the continent of Africa a semblance of independence without allowing them to be independent. In other words, the puppeteer is still alive and the puppets are still there, and they do not go out to use anybody. They come from within our ranks. You know, when Cheikh Anta Diop, that famous historian, wrote his book, The Origins of Civilization, he targeted in Africa. And when he wanted to write his PhD thesis at the University of Sorbonne in France, and he wanted to tell the real story, they said he would never earn his PhD because they wanted to destroy Pan-Africanism. That is why we must always be wary of some within our ranks who are wolves in sheepskin. They are there. They are as dangerous as the colonizers. They are danger to Pan-Africanism. They are danger to Africa. They have always been there. They keep on multiplying. They keep on doing and engaging in their diabolical acts because they know that the spirit of Pan-Africanism cannot be destroyed, but it can be frustrated. And if we understand that, then we'll be able to expose these enemies of Pan-Africanism and deal them a death blow, because that is what must happen to them. Pan-Africanism is alive and well. It must also be agile. It must be agile in order to identify our enemies. It must identify those who come in the name of donor aid. Why do they love us so much now that they give us aid? Why do they come now that they tell us how to run our education institutions? Why do they love us now that they tell us how to run our health institutions? Why do they love us now that they tell us how to run our agriculture? Why do they love us now that they tell us how to conduct our politics and to tell us whether we are democratic or not democratic, while they destroyed our Pan-African institution? John Henry Clark was right. African countries must wake up and recognize that conducting our affairs, political or otherwise, by mimicking Western prescriptions, whether they be from France or the United Kingdom or Portugal or Spain or Italy or any other colonizers, will never take us anywhere. We must remove the cloak of colonization. We must remove the jackets that we borrowed and reclaim our territory by doing everything that defines Africa and Africans in a manner that will allow them to engage with other civilizations from a position of strength. You know, when you have an enemy that keeps on changing like the chameleon, you also must have the habits of the chameleon. The African enemies are chameleonic in their behavior. We too must be chameleonic in our desire to survive. We must change how we operate, and changing how we operate means that we change our mindset and change our approaches. I'm told that a good war general does not warn the enemy when they are going to land. They operate in a subterranean way and only reveal such information as is necessary. We of the Pan-African persuasion must continue to preach the gospel of Pan-Africanism, but the finer details must only be left to the truly initiated. We must have eyes on both sides of our heads, because it is only then that we will be able to identify those who have launched torpedoes and in this latter day launched missiles and launched drones in order to destroy the continent of Africa and our sons and daughters in the diaspora. It can be done, it must be done, because it has been done before. The spirit of Pan-Africanism is a relay race that started with its founding fathers, W.B. Du Bois and John Sylvester Williams and others, and must be continued to the next generation. It is generation to generation. As the Chewa in Malawi says, more important than our children, our children's children, and that is what the spirit of Pan-Africanism is all about. Thank you very much. Once again, goodbye, but it's a goodbye that is not an end. It's a goodbye that promises another meeting on another occasion. Goodbye. See you again.